Hi, my name is Harrison Cross, and I don't know who my target audience is. That being said, don't really care. I'm just kind of recording this, and I'll share just so that it's not stuck on some computer and I have to try to find it. I always come back and listen to myself at some later point. Just kind of want to give a summary of where I am and talk about where I think I'm headed. And that's pretty much it. I'll just go ahead and jump in. What you see up on the right-hand side is a list of languages that I've attempted to do something with. And I have that pinned, so I'm going to just kind of go through some of these and just talk about it. I could go through the examples language and then click on Ada. And recently I've been able to add something where I can just go Ada right there and enter. This is something that shouldn't be too new to people who have used Visual Studio Code before, but I'm going to basically just go from there. So top one on the list has a red mark beside it. It's sort of a dark red, and that's just because I do have syntax highlighting, but I do not have a compiler set up, whether it be WASM or JS or whatever. There's nothing that I've been able to find that will allow me to compile this strictly in the browser and run it in the browser. I've seen a lot of solutions where they basically call back to a Ada in the background or some command line in the background, and I think that's probably like the less troublesome solution, but I'm not at a stage where I'm trying to do that yet. I would still like to try to keep this as much in browser as possible, and those of you who've been with me before, or if you look at my previous videos, you'll know that part of the thing I was trying to do here is to make a sort of offline service worker kind of flow where you can edit your files and whenever you're ready, bring that to whatever server you want. And I don't think you should have to have the server in order to do that. Maybe in the future, as I build out the back end, that'll be one of the things that I include, but not for right now. And so, yeah, let's move on from Ada to AssemblyScript. I think I've already done AssemblyScript before. We're going to utilize that menu, and AssemblyScript is different in that if you don't have a preview locked over on the right, it'll actually compile to WASM and then run that WASM. And I'll go ahead and just show that. Most of my examples are going to be Fibonacci sequence. You can get into AssemblyScript if you want. Maybe I will at some point, but you get this little preview that basically just shows you all the stuff on the outside. Now, this could compile to something that affects a preview over here a little bit more, besides like just this, these numbers here. For now, though, that's as far as I went with these languages that I'm supporting. Another thing that I've done, and you'll notice whenever if I haven't made any changes to this, the file doesn't stick around. So if I Control P and go back to the file that I was just looking at, I think that was language template progress, you'll notice that that file gets replaced with something saying no editable text for this file type. Had I made changes to that, the file would have stuck around. So yeah, that's a little bit better than having a ton of tabs keeping on, like increasing up at the top here. And it's something that Visual Studio does, and I kind of took a cue from that. Saving means a little something different in this than it does in Visual Studio. So we'll go into the conversation about that a little bit later, maybe. I'm going to go ahead and lock this, and I'm going to move on from AssemblyScript. But before I move on, I want to make one point. You'll notice that AssemblyScript doesn't have any color icon beside it. That's because I had AssemblyScript syntax highlighting file icons. It basically looks just like what you would see if you had a plugin for AssemblyScript in Visual Studio, and it recognized the syntax, and with the caveat or like the extra part that it has this sort of REPL or whatever preview to the right, and so I've accomplished everything I wanted to accomplish with AssemblyScript with that. and so it doesn't have an icon next to it. Similar thing with brainfuck, and I think I've shown this before, but I don't know if I have. So anyways, brainfuck, this particular program will just output hello world, which is what I have most of my template outputs going to. Maybe I'll look for a Fibonacci sequence for brainfuck, but I don't know. The whole idea was just, let's get the, this is one of the first templates I created, I think. Let's get the template running so that it shows some output, and it's not showing output right now because we have this image pinned here, but yeah, it'll output something that just says hello world, and that's it. I probably won't develop in brainfuck, but there's a syntax highlighter there, and I don't know, it was a proof of concept to start getting into the syntax highlighting and getting into the templating. And there was a brainfuck compiler somewhere. It's not very hard to find. I didn't need WASM or anything like that. So brainfuck is just an example of me just kind of testing out the system. One of the first languages that got me onto this, I'm going to move on to Clojure, was Clojure. And that's because I found this thing called clips. And again, this is basically just going to print out the Fibonacci sequence, and so I'm not going to show it. But Clojure came along with this thing called clips, and clips, basically they've tried to do the same thing that I'm doing here. So I was able to dig in into clips and basically figure out which libraries they were using, and that helped me out with a lot of the other things that I've done here. I think C++, maybe a few others, but yeah, clips is just resting on the shoulder of giants. I basically did the same thing, and I will actually have a page at some point that this says thanks to all these people, but don't have it right now. So anyways, that's Clojure. Clojure is Lispy. I'm learning. I don't know, and I've learned a little bit about how to print out or how to program in Clojure, just a little bit, just by doing this. That's part of the reason why I'm doing it. So I'm going to move on to C++. Yeah, that. And C++ will output to, I think it's using a library that basically just compiles C++ to JavaScript and then runs it. I don't think they're doing anything WASM or anything like that, but yeah. So yeah, it'll print out a Fibonacci sequence, and that's it. These other languages, I'll just go ahead and walk through them, group them all together. I'm going to skip over C#, but I'm just going to go down the rows with all the languages that probably I won't be supporting anytime soon, or until I get like one of those backend language server kind of deals going on. And that's Crystal, Dart, Dlang, Elixir, Elm, Erlang, Haskell, Ink, Nim, Pony, Erlang, and Rust and Swift. Basically, those are the languages that I will probably need the backend to support me on, and not going to be able to compile those. I do have a route that I might go down, and that's basically just compiling the compiler itself to LLVM, and then there's this LLVM JS that I might be able to use that takes IR and puts it to WASM. I don't know. We'll see. Anyways, all of those are ones that you know, I kind of had to give up on or whatever. But I did get as far as just to show an example, Crystal. I was able to, you know, at least get syntax highlighting in place, and I think a few of these, maybe Crystal was one of them, that I had to like kind of just make it myself. One of the worst ones was Pony, and I basically had to go and look at a ACE syntax highlighter and convert that to code mirror using something that someone else had created at some point, and it was sort of a real hairy kind of tricky thing. Code mirror supports a lot of languages by default. Some of those I just haven't even added into this process or into this system, but I would like at some point to build a system that pretty much will just pull those down by default, or allow you to install those as you want. Right now, I'm sort of like doing a very manual process in order to do that. But okay, I do have those languages in place as far as like I have an example Fibonacci code, and I have like uh, syntax highlighting in place for those. So yeah, Dart, D-Lane, blah blah blah. I'm not gonna go too far on that. The oranger ones are sort of like, and there's two different colors of orange. Orange is like, I think I could probably get something going with this, but I haven't got it yet, and I think it might take a little bit of effort. So of those, C# and F# are basically like the Blazor or mono.wasm languages, and I've seen some examples that lead me to believe that I could put something in place. It's going to take a little bit of work, but my first coding job was C# for like 3 years, and I kind of would like to have C# in there. And while I was there, I had at that job I had a passing interest at F#. I've actually spun up a Docker container to try to teach myself F# a little bit. I would like to have some F# in place just so I can just kick around with it. Basically get little whims and when I go at it every once in a while. And that's kind of what I want people to do. I want them to be able to go to this and, just, hey, let's try this out. It's not costing me anything except for my time. So yeah, fourth was something I did recently. Skipping over those reds down to fourth over here, and it's been kind of a pain. Not just in like getting it running, but also just it does things differently. And I think the other one that I would compare that to is Prolog. And I say it's a pain in the sense that like it asks me to think differently about something. In fact, like the program structure is like not too different than JavaScript or C or what I've been used to so far, except they use reverse Polish notation. So the first argument here that gets pushed to stack is 0. Second argument is the 10, and then you call fib all. I guess you put that to stack. This to-do pulls duplicates the last 2 arguments, and then I swap those out so that those will implicitly be passed to this do. The do is we'll be using both of those arguments and basically say I want to go 0 to 10, and do requires that you swap those out. Basically, just everything's backwards. So inside do, you get this implicit I, which is kind of cool. I've seen code around that where they use lowercase I, and I wasn't able to make the code work until I got uppercase I. And I will tell you that this, while this is really cool that someone has forked this or like has created a compiler that basically like jams this into WASM and lets me do fourth code. I think that's really neat. It's a little bit finicky, and from what I understand, looking at fourth, like there's different languages or different types of fourth. So add those two together, the fact that it's like a finicky browser solution, or that it doesn't have a great interface. I mean programming interface. And yeah, it was a little bit tricky to get there, but got there, and I kind of enjoyed the being able to program differently, and I could see myself putting some time into kind of thinking about things in a different way. Kind of enjoyed the challenge, or I don't know. So yeah, I mean, I would like to maybe teach people fourth at one point, or just walk through and talk about my experience with this, which is kind of what I'm doing right now. One thing I'm doing differently in this template is I'm looking for commented lines that include an import in them, and then the HTML that's basically running the template, which would be in the preview. I must remind you, that is basically just going to append this this style sheet, which is essentially a stylist style sheet, which is pretty close to Sass. So yeah, I kind of got tired of building the CSS for all of those previews that I was creating, and even especially since they were basically just using some kind of font, and so I just went with a shared style, and that's the pattern I'm following right now. So anyways, that's fourth, and I could write more fourth code here, but yeah, I'm going to move on. I think I mentioned F# and C# already. Golang, this one gives me some trouble from time to time, and it was definitely a different kind of challenge to put in place. Most of the time wasn't spent right here. It was spent in the developer console trying to figure out how can I get this thing working. And that one did take me a lot longer than all of the other, than Fortran. I'm sorry, Forth did, but did get it going. And it's nice when you have a reference. One thing I don't have going on right now that I hope to get in the future, you see tabs here as the invisible character. And if you go back to fourth, let's go back to fourth. If you go back to fourth, you see spaces there. I don't really have it so that the editor is detecting whether spaces or tabs are being used, and I don't have a way to switch between those right now. It stays pretty much stuck in space mode. And if I start doing some edits to that Go file, go back to that. If I start doing some edits to that, those tabs will go away and automatically just be converted to spaces. It's something I'd like to do sometime in the future, but haven't really done yet. So move past Golang. I'm almost tempted to show what kind of performance I was getting for that one, just on, maybe we'll run through that a little later. Haskell is another one of those ones I think I mentioned before. Hyperscript, I might actually move this out. Hyperscript is basically just a different format for doing like React or kind of a pre-act kind of view without using JSX. So you get to skip the transpile step, and I don't really consider it a language. I'll probably move that somewhere else. And I don't even though I'm showing that that's supported, I don't really have like strict support for hyperscript. In fact, if I look at the hyperscript, I'm pretty sure this won't do anything, but in the future I could get it. So you'll see it's not JSX. It uses all these like H and basically just uses a JavaScript or JSON kind of syntax. And I could see myself building an app for this, but I'll tell you, like, if I'm going to go this far, I kind of would prefer just to use JSX, and I don't really want to be like showing people code like this and being like, yeah, check it out, it's JSX. Especially when I'll show an example of my React code here in a little bit. It's very, very painless. So yeah, that's hyperscript. Ink is another one that I was curious about, but I don't really see the person who created it is supporting any kind of WASM or anything like that. And I could dig into this later and figure out that I could do something with it, but not right now. Java and Kotlin both have a TVM, I think is what I've heard, and that particular library could possibly work to do what I'm trying to do here, but it's going to take some digging. And yeah, Kotlin would be interesting to mess around with. JavaScript is one of the ones I'm most excited about, and I'll go into that one later, just because I really want to dig in and show like some of the cool things I've been able to do with that. And JavaScript will be like the example of what I want all of these to be when they arrive, or I'd hope for all of these to be. Julia, I think I found something that will work to get Julia going. Lisp has been something that's been going for a while and was like relatively painless, and also yucky looking. I don't know. I say it's yucky looking. I'm just not used to this kind of format. Certain things kind of stick out at me as like, it's kind of gross. But yeah, and this came over as part of the whole like clips thing, I believe. A similar one to that is Scheme. I think Scheme came along with the whole clips thing, and that one's pretty straightforward. I don't really have driver code set up for that one. In fact, that one's in an interesting state. I'll probably go through that after I finish going through this list. So yeah, scheme works. I didn't really know what to do for some of the icons for these, so that one gets a lambda, and I think Lisp got a lambda as well. OCaml, I'm sorry, I skipped over nim. No, I mentioned nim earlier. Nim's one of those ones that I'd really like to do something with, but I think it's mainly a server-side language. Same kind of thing with, and I don't see where that went. Yeah, Zig. So I do have, I don't have that on this list, but I do have the icon and highlighting for Zig. It seems like an interesting language, but I don't know that I can do too much with it. You'll see that there was an overflow that happened there, and you get this cool shadow and all that. I put that back in place. I've not up to this point been like terribly happy with the way that this whole thing's scrolling, but now I feel like it's pretty perfect. I'll go back to languages here in just a second. I just wanted to talk about like, yeah, I kind of feel like that's cool. Painting, drawing these panes has been sort of a pain point, and that tree's been sort of a pain point. I put these icons back in place to do new file and new folder, but I haven't connected those. I think you're not even seeing anything because it's the console that will see new folder handle or not implemented. Use the right click menu. It's basically just saying, if you want to create a new file, what you need to do is that right there, hit new file and go from there. And that's working pretty decent. I still need to go through and scrub through all the situations like deleting, renaming. I need to finish out, open in terminal, copy, rename, all of that stuff. I've got a lot of these close the tabs, close the other tabs, close to the right, close all, copy the path, pen, all that stuff. And I don't have any of these editor level right click menus done. So, I mean, they're done, they just haven't been connected, and so I need to connect them. So anyways, Zig should have been down at the bottom. I believe I was at OCaml and Pascal. For both those, I have a solution, and I should be able to put those in place. Most of the ones with yellow, I should be able to put in place, and my goal is to get to the point where those ones that are yellow are kind of gone. Perl and Raku, both of those are, I think Raku is essentially like Perl 6. I don't know what's going on in their community, but I don't know what the icon should be for that one, but they have like a little butterfly, so I just made up like a little basic butterfly. Who knows? Maybe Raku will go disappear or whatever, but it's in there. PHP, the implementation I have is like pretty slow. So yeah, I may actually change out the template for that one. I don't see myself writing a lot of PHP, but there's things that PHP does that other languages wound up doing, and I think it's good to kind of have around for that sake. And I've made PHP before, but I only ever used it for templating. I kind of thought like it might be kind of interesting to see what people are doing with PHP and if I could use PHP in a way that would be interesting. So yeah, it's there. I don't see anything necessarily right now that's impressing me, but yeah, syntax highlighting's in there. It wasn't a terrible big deal to put in, and the compiler thing that exists is pretty decent. It's slow, but there's another compiler I could use. And I mentioned Pony before. Pony's kind of like Zig or Swift or any of these ones that like are really kind of cool, but can't really do anything with them. I got syntax highlighting in place, and that's pretty much all I can do. Or as far as I'm going to go with it for the time being. I'm going to look at Prolog, and yeah, this is Prolog. Prolog is another one of those ones that has like a model. I spent some time really trying to figure out how I was going to do main here. I didn't know numlist and find all and all that. This is all based around like predicates. So essentially, you're basically doing something similar to like a query language whenever you're writing in this, and they don't really have this concept of functions so much as like here's a predicate. So Yeah, that one's pretty interesting, and it wasn't terribly hard. Prolog is was pretty easy to integrate with this, and so yeah, I mean it's another example of like I'm trying to get the pattern worked out, and so yeah. So Prolog Python, I think I don't remember if it was Python or PHP that was the one that was running slowly, but I do know that there's like a lot of people in the Python community that are interested in seeing Python on the web, or at least there's enough that there are solutions out there. So there's Python, and this actually runs. It prints out uh, Python, or sorry, it prints out the Fibonacci sequence. So yeah, Python, I think, was another one of those ones that came along with Clips, but I'm not 100% sure. And I already mentioned Reiku. R is another one of those that's like server side. It would be interesting to see, but it's really hard to search for because so many people, and this is a good point to get to, I think, like so many people who are coming up with WASM solutions are essentially like coming up with a server side WASM solution. So you build the thing on the server side, and that allows you to export basically a binary to the browser, and the browser runs from there. And I feel like it reflects the attitude that people have towards front end. I don't really know if that attitude is something that'll play out really well, but it's basically like the way that front end developers came to the back end with Node. WASM is kind of like, haha, but we'll get you back. We'll run our server code in the browser, and you can't do anything about it. And I don't really adopt that attitude. I like the idea of having alternatives to not only like JavaScript's model, but like in the language itself, but like just this. I like this new model of having a different target in the browser. And I don't think that's like terribly different than why people are latching on to WASM from the server side. But I don't really dig the whole like we'll get you back, we'll be in the server. And I don't like whether or not that actually is something that's occurring. I don't like the fact that the browser is not a first class target for people to be building these WASM files. A lot of the ones that or at least some of the ones that I've mentioned already, you can compile that WASM file in the browser, and I really like that. I will at some point get onto the server and compile the WASM files onto the server, but I feel like it's sort of, at least in this case, I'm biased towards I would like to be able to compile in the browser and not have to go to a server. I I'll just say I'm biased both ways. Sometimes I want to be able to do stuff on the server. Other times I want to be able to do things in the client. And this is one of those cases where I want to do things in the client. I kind of hate that there's like a distinction. Anyways, I'm digressing. So Rust is kind of like people are building WASM that is pretty much just built on the server side, and it's usually like single purpose, or for the purpose of that app, they don't send over the whole compiler. So yeah, I can kind of understand where they're coming from. But whatever, it's frustrating when I'm trying to do this. So their scheme, I mentioned that before. SQL's not too much different than Prolog in the sense that like you're basically following predicates, or you're maybe somewhere in between predicates versus procedural code. So you start with your query selector, and then you just keep doing stuff to it. Declarative, maybe you want to call it, but there's sort of a procedural flow to it. Grab this, join to that, do this to it, and then select part of that, and there you go. But SQL, I think, came along with Clips, although I didn't actually use Clips for that because Clips is a ClojureScript project, and they wrap ClojureScript around all of that. And for me, it's like the code that winds up getting output is like has layers of extra complexity that, not, in my opinion, aren't really necessary, but they're also kind of frustrating to look at. So I just went straight to the you're using this, so I'll just go and see how the author wants that to be used, and I just use it in a web way, like by requiring scripts and doing JavaScript and that kind of stuff. So yeah, SQL. This is one of the first ones that I had the idea that I could I could put a comment in place, and that could be like fetch, and that could be like some JSON somewhere, you know, HTTP like foo.com/myfile.json, and I think I could do something like fetch as, you know, table. And so what's cool about that is, like, there's an asynchronous call for that particular JSON. It gets parsed, and we put that into a table. So I really like the idea of being able to like kind of treat the web as a table. That's pretty cool. So yeah, so there's SQL, and Swift is another one of those ones I'd like to try out, but it's pretty much like a server-side language, or, you know, client, Android, or sorry, mobile language. I don't know. I just haven't found the support I need to like get it working, and I don't know that I will until I at some point get onto the server and create a server layer for this. So yeah, that brings me to the end. TypeScript, I'm not leaving it off. It's just I haven't really done, even though I don't have a something next to that. I haven't actually like went too deep into the TypeScript world with this particular solution. Although AssemblyScript is a lot like TypeScript, so yeah, I'll dig into that more and make it so that people can use TypeScript if they want here. I do like the idea maybe of not having to worry about the compiling. And I think that's a pretty good opportunity there for me to jump over into, oh, there's the SQL code. And this is an older style of me doing the output. Sort of a newer style would be, let's see, let's find, we'll go back to AssemblyScript. The newer style is me just making it look like flat. Okay, so bam, there's that. But I promised I would talk about JavaScript, and I like to talk about JSX. These are the ones that, like, I think maybe I'll do like the clickbaity title with. And I have made some changes recently to both the JavaScript and, well, I created the JavaScript template, but I also have made some changes into the way that I'm basically allowing imports and stuff like that. I'm gonna start with the To-Do app that I've had around for a while. So there's To-Do JSX, and so yeah, this is a typical like React app. This is what you would expect to see if you were developing this on, you know, directly on the metal, I guess. And this would be a preview of that. Basically, this particular file is going to be put through a Babel translation layer, and this is generally where you would have Webpack, who's like combining all these together. But I jump in and do the role of Webpack. I basically say, oh, for every one of those that's an import, let's just run those through Babel too, and we'll include those all as a file. It winds up being pretty quick, and yeah, I'm not terribly interested in like making that into a dist folder, but I could do that, and then people could use it from the dist. But yeah, here's my to-do list, and it, you know, JSX seems to work really well for that. And I'm basically just using a hooks implementation, but really kind of cool to be using like the one like module system, and just doing it kind of the same way you would expect to see, and no one had to install anything, and that's what's cool. So I did at one point have this JSX, like all of these. I don't really have this working right. So whenever I open this up, it should actually open up the folder, but I don't have that working right. If I go into To-Do, basically like there's all the stuff that I would normally expect to see in a To-Do folder if it were a JSX app. I'm sorry, if it were a React app. So, and I think I'm using Preact on the background for this, but I mean, it's a React app. Yeah, the only difference is using Stylus. I typically use like less or Sass, but Stylus is pretty slick. It looks a lot like Sass or less, and the only thing I think is different is like the mixins or the variables. So yeah, I don't even care. So I'm using Stylus for that, just because they had an online compiler, and Sass, that's one of the things that's irritated me about it. You have to use libsass. I know there's like a JS version of libsass or Sass, But man, I really just don't get the idea. I mean, I get it, but like I don't want to go into that. But yeah, like you're in a Node app and you get hung up because you can't compile libsass. It's like, you spend days on this. All right, but yeah, I wanted just to illustrate that, I've kind of tried to figure out, okay, yeah, I've got a template that can do this JSX, but uh, how do I break that up into files? Because that's something that, anybody who uses this is going to want to do. And you're going to want to be able to, create a new file and, import that, create, as you're building that. So yeah, this system's pretty much set up for creating React apps. And at some point, I'll do the same thing with like Angular, and I'll bring HyperScript over here and kind of show an example of that a little bit later. But yeah, that's one thing. And I am not terribly that big into creating apps, I've discovered. I mean, I am, but I find it a little bit quicker just to do something like this. Just start with a JavaScript file and no HTML, and I'll show you an example of me going through in that way. So this is basically like I wanted to be able to, for the use case of I want to do math on something. I don't want to have to go and create this graph every single time. So I just use Plotly, and I'm basically building a little library for myself that will allow me to do things like what's the derivative, what's the integral, how do I do like a linear regression or something like that. So this is my area to explore. And the way that those usually start out, I'll just walk through that. So let's start with this. I think this one right here is one I was trying to show. So I don't have this in place yet, but I'd like it to be like anytime you create a new JS file, it just starts with here's a comment up at the top, here's your dependencies, and I may actually just use an import for that. I don't know, like I did with the JSX. And then here's a asynchronous loop that you can, or asynchronous function, asynchronous closure that you can go through and just go ahead and start doing stuff. Like first of all, we'll append the URLs. Like I want to use the shared style. That gives me the style that I have over here. And I'm not really doing a lot here to, set up the HTML or anything like that. If I wanted to do that, and I thought about wrapping this part of it too, but I could say, I'm going to have an element, and I'm going to say document create element, and I'm going to create let's create a pre, and then we're going to take that, we're going to say document body and child. I don't like typing all this stuff out, and that's why I said I might wrap all this, but we'll append that element. And maybe you can't see anything there yet, so I'm going to say that element dot text content is equal to hello, and there it is. And I can even go quicker than that. I can just basically say console.log hello, and there it is. I think that's right. Oh, console log hello. And just to prove that that's really a new thing, I'm going to just do this. You'll notice that the text was changing while I was doing that, and I wind up in situations sometimes where it's like, there's an error, and you can't really see that error. It really should be showing up like differently. It should be like, I'll show you how it should be. It should be like console error. It should look like that, but for whatever reason, I'm not capturing the error properly. But what I really would like is, before all this runs, I would like to just run linting on it. And I think I'm going to do that, but I haven't done it yet. So if it doesn't lint, then I don't try to run it. And we can just put something in there that says there's a linting area. That way, as I'm typing this up, I don't get these weird situations where some text is being appended, but it's not being appended with the right class, so it doesn't look like an error. That being said, you can do console.info, and you can say it is in a box. So you notice the difference between Notice the difference between the console info, console error. I don't have console warn, I think, yet, but this allows me just to kind of close out the console and just go. And I'll give an example of what that looks like here in a little bit. I'll just do one more thing. There's also Prism available, and Prism will allow you to automatically highlight. And I'm going to do like JSON.stringify, stringify, and I don't know, maybe we'll stringify a foo and make that bar. And then I can do the typical null, comma 2, and I get like nice formatted, colored kind of output. So Prism allows me to do that. I could also just paste in JavaScript code there. I could have done dependencies there. So I could I can toString a function there. It's quite convenient, and I'll walk through how that works, or an example of that working. So let's see, I have a couple golfing exercises. So, and this is an example where I'm like, hey, I need some kind of like network view. So basically I just console info, and I pin the childs for I pin the styles. I just start saying, hey, you're given this, it's in a box, and I can leave notes to myself over here. And then another, I guess, interesting kind of way of looking at this is I could, turn it into kind of like a full page. And I'm going to do a F5 and try that again, just because I want to see it like this. Yeah, and so I have some issues with the graph. Like, it doesn't change whenever it doesn't stretch out whenever the thing changes. But yeah, graph should refresh on resize, and basic config options should be provided. So that brings me to an interesting kind of like, I can make these little blocks, and I can show a graph in one of them. I can show a sort of like stretchy network D3 kind of graph connections. But also, what if, so yeah, I don't know, this is going to be terribly easy to describe, but if you look at the way that I was doing that one, I did that in Explore, I think. So I did used to have basically where I imported the template for that particular graph, and I did that as an iframe. I've changed that to be the template itself is when it's embedded, and you embed it the proper way, it reaches out and says, hey, can you tell me what graphs you want? And that's looking something like this. Let me just zoom back out. So that's looking like I build the graph here, and then I say I want to create the graph. And the create graph is basically going to message that template and make sure that the template gets the information that it needs, so it can go ahead and boot up with that in place. I've taken that a little bit further in one of the experiments that I've been running, or one of the things that I'm putting in place. I usually do those in Incubate, and I did that with, so let's see, gotta find it. So yeah, probably need to wrap this up sometime soon. So I don't know if that was under, template messages. So there we have the template is in a loading state until it's finally loaded up, and then it just comes in with the graph. So there's another layer of like kind of like the template talking to the exterior. I'll go into one more thing about that. I've recently changed the service worker. It used to show up like a white screen sometimes if you were to say stop the service worker in the background, which happens if you walk away from your computer for like 50 minutes or something and then come back. That would show up with a white screen. all these templates are being created by the service worker or a module that gets loaded into the service worker. So that was like bread and butter. That actually is pretty much done now. And I'm going to go through some of these like really quickly. Everything I've talked about is like pretty huge so far, I think, but cool. Yeah. So the zip project is me basically, I have a few different zip kind of things going on. It's basically like the early workings of me working on downloading a zip of everything you have in here so you don't have to keep it in your browser. I think probably the better one to look at is this download zip, and that will basically call out and get the service number 778, which is this one, this here, that's 778. And when you click save as zip, it'll actually save a zip of that, and that's doing all that in the browser. I need to move that over to the service worker, but haven't done that yet, and I will. Drop file and paste image are all kind of similar. You could just drop a file from your browser. I'm sorry, from your operating system, and it'll basically like say, hey, I've got it. So I'll connect that in with the download zip, and paste image is kind of the similar thing. It's like you take a screenshot, you paste the image, and it winds up being put into the file system. And an example of where that is this paste image right here. That's the image. So you can paste an image into the file system that you have running here in the browser. That was another huge one for me, and I need to connect all of that into the overall workings of this. WebTorrent is another one that like connects in with that. Basically, I don't want WebTorrent so that I can download movies, although that's kind of cool. I do want to be able to do this sharing and getting of the torrent from someone else, and that's not terribly hard to put in. So I'll be connecting those in sometime soon. Anyways, this movie should play but yeah. Like I said, that's not the point of that. The whole point is to be able to fluidly and freely move in and out, to be able to edit code whenever you want to, and to be able to share that. And one more that relates to that is the Git. Isomorphic Git is another cool library. Isomorphic Git will basically like connect to a repository, and I'm going to go through this, although you can enter your username in there. Anyways, the whole point is that you could connect to a Git repository and actually make pushes. This little experiment will actually make pushes of code that I have here. So really all that's left is to connect all these things in and integrate them. Basically, the integration would look something like I serve it up in one of these files, the settings file that comes in, and this would take the place of what Visual Studio Code has for settings. Right now, I'm just using it to connect to a basic server that I have in the background, so that anytime I save a file, that actually the change to that file gets reflected into the file system. And then also I could add the folder. That backend service lets me pop up this dialog. It's not possible to do that with the browser in this way. It's not possible to do it with the browser in its current form. So the browsers are real cagey about like, whether or not they're going to let you upload things, or whether or not they're going to warn the users. So I kind of just go around that. So yeah, a lot of those things about like adding, removing, kind of going in and out, committing files, committing to a Git repository. A lot of that stuff is like very close to being done, and at that point, I'll probably move more onto the server. You can switch your service. I'm not terribly happy with where this is so far, but I'll go ahead and close this out. So now I actually don't have any service loaded, and I can connect to one of those providers I was talking about, which could be like the Bartok Advanced service or the Bartok Basic service. I could load a previously open service. There's a list that will pop up here soon of previously opened. I'll go back to the welcome service that I just had open. And yeah, so there's a ton to talk about if you haven't figured out, but just a quick couple little things, and I'll quit it out. So Here's a minimap. Working on getting the minimap on. Oh, that's not working well. Okay, so there's the minimap. I'm working on getting that minimap in place here, and working better than what I see here. It should be, achieving parity with the Visual Studio code. Get that in place. I'm also working on getting search in place. I do have search per file in place. That comes with cancel you. If you're in the editor, like actually clicked onto the editor pane, you'll get this this sort of find dialog, and it's not quite as nice as Visual Studio Codes, but it serves a purpose. If I go to Style, hit Enter, there you go. I can go through all the different. Let's just look for something that's going to appear more const. It'll let you go through all the consts that are in the file. It's useful, and don't really have it wired up with all the extra stuff that you can get in Visual Studio Code. Don't really care about that right now. But related, you should be able to Control-Shift-F, and that should pull up this whole search dialog, which I don't have in place. Or you should be able to right-click on a folder and say search in the folder, which I don't have in place. But here is a experiment for me where I am basically putting that search in place, and I've used it a few times. Use it to search for, say, let me find where the value is. Zoom back in. The value that I'm searching for here is, where's my search term? Here we go, languages. So I could search for to do, and that's going to search all of 778 and tell me where all the to-dos are. I find it in all of these files. So yeah, I'll be connecting that sometime soon. And let's see, WebTorrent zip, minimap, golden layout. That's another big one. I'd like to be able to rip off one of these tabs and kind of throw it into another pane. And that's something that Visual Studio Code has, and I don't really have right now. I do have like sort of basic panes. You can close it, and you could hide the terminal one. You can do kind of like a full screen or whatever. But let me just show you what this would look like, and something similar to this. So imagine that that's the Explorer here, and it has the tree in the place. Splitting terminal, that's a big deal, and I don't have that yet. Although, my terminal is also anorexic in other ways. But doing that whole grab this, and I want to move it there or there, or whatever. Yeah, so that's something that I have in the works, and maybe finish that out. So yeah, that's another thing that I'm working on. And if you see, like, basically I just create a JavaScript file or an HTML file and just start popping these libraries in here and seeing what I can do to like kind of get it to a rough shape, and then I move it to the overall app. And I'd like the steps between doing that to moving to the overall app to like shorten, but I've not got to a point where it's like super short yet. But that's the idea. I think that's pretty much it. Those language files I was just talking about. Here's one that I could show you. Couple quick things real quick, and I'll just stop. So I mentioned that I'm able to open zip files. There's that. I've thought about making those zip files actually just show up as folders, and you should just be able to navigate down them and make changes to the stuff that's inside them. PPM files. This is something that I did in my CSS, or sorry, in my CS classes in school. Basically just going, because it's a text-only format, or can be a text-only format, just going through and changing values in programmatically, and that resulting in an image. So yeah, PPM is one of those things that done some. Sprite sheets are something that I'm working on. I'd like to get this sprite sheet actually working. There's a file called piksel, file format called piksel, which is basically just a JSON format, and I'd like to support that. This piksel kind of image that I created on Piksel or Piksel, or yeah, it's Piksel. Piksel, the site. I'd like to be able to create a bunch of those and just pop them in over here. Haven't figured out what I want to do with the JSON that's in there. Kind of like whether I want to format it differently or whatever. So I don't have highlighting going on over there, but I did include as part of the template where I'll just go through and make it basically this JSON that you're seeing over here will show up over here. I don't know that it'll stay like that. I'd kind of just like that to be like an animated something. A couple other things. I'm looking at ZBrush, and ZBrush is included. They have a 3D 3D GIF and 3D JPEG, and somewhere in this data is 3D information, and you should be able to pull that little 3D gremlin out of there. I'd like to be able to do that. I'm not sure I'm going to be able to do it though. Here's another example. Somewhere in that animated noise field down there, you can pull this guy out of there. We'll see if I'm able to do that. Same thing with Optimus Prime here. And let's see. SVGs I've been able to do for a while, and I kind of like the idea of being able to like edit this SVG off to the left here. And I think that's probably it. Oh, I did a little experiment where I was trying to get. I had to write a parser in order to get. Let's see if I can find. Is it under support? Yeah, graph formats, GML. So I wrote a parser that allows me to go from this sort of GML language file format to JSON, and the next step will be to make that actually go into a graph in D3. So I should be able to support. Now I don't have language highlighting for this, so I'll have to figure out how to write a language highlighter for CodeMirror. But yeah, that's something I'm interested in. And there's a ton more that I'm interested in that I want to do with this, but yeah, in general, that's kind of the idea there. Like should be able to do what I want with this thing, and I want other people to be able to do what they want with it, and we'll see how that works. So yeah, that's pretty much all I have to talk about right now. I could probably talk about a ton more, but I won't. And we'll just leave it at that. Just leave it with one of my favorite quotes from George E.P. Box that I read about on the internet somewhere. All models are wrong, but some models are useful.